Do you believe in ghosts? You should probably believe in ghosts because there's plenty of terrifying proof of their existence out there. One of the most chilling tales comes from Eastern Airlines Flight 401. On Christmas Eve, 1972, a Boeing 737 was flying from New York to Miami when it lost power to its No.2 engine. The pilots radioed their problem to a TC and requested an ILS approach to runway 10 at Miami International Airport. While the crew worked on the problem, the plane continued to lose altitude, and they wound up crashing into the Florida Everglades. Of the 176 people on board, 101 didn't make it. The NTSB launched an investigation into the crash, and the evidence pointed to pilot error. Now, if you want to know what really happened, I suggest you watch this video here. But after this video, the airline began salvaging parts from the wreck to put in other planes. And soon enough, the crew of those planes started seeing ghosts. Let's take a look at what really happened. It all started when the salvage company recovered the flight engineer's compartment from the wreckage. They found it relatively unharmed, and the parts were removed for later use. That's when they noticed a nameplate that read off the initials of the deceased flight engineer was still attached. It was decided that the plate would be left on the wall in memory of the dead man. However, other crew members insisted it be removed, since it was too painful to see every day, so they took the plate off. But apparently they disturbed something evil. Now, Eastern Airlines wasn't in the business of believing in ghosts or superstitions, so they carried on as normal. Soon, strange things started happening on the flight deck of the new aircraft. The first incident occurred on June 28, 1973. Captain Robert Loft was preparing for takeoff when he heard a knock. He turned around and saw nobody. Then he felt a cold spot on the right side of the aircraft. He shrugged it off until 2 days later when he experienced the same thing again. On July 1, 1973, Loft was getting ready for takeoff when he felt a sudden chill. As he looked over to his right, he saw the outline of a man in the corner of his eye. He described it as being humanoid in shape, but it had no face and seemed transparent. The sighting lasted only a few seconds before disappearing. This unnerved him and the others, but they continued on with their day. Later that evening, while preparing for takeoff, Loft felt that cold spot again and saw that same shadowy figure. He wasn't alone this time. There were 5 other crew members who witnessed the apparition. They described it as being between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet tall. It was wearing a military-style uniform, white shirt, and a tie. It walked through the bulkhead, separating the cockpit from the cabin, and disappeared. This was just the beginning. Their pilots reported seeing similar apparitions in the cockpit. Some even claimed that the ghost had interacted with them. On one occasion, a flight engineer was reading back the pre-takeoff checklist when he heard his name called. Startled, he turned around and saw nobody. He thought nothing of it until it happened again a few weeks later. It wasn't just voices that were heard, though. Some pilots reported hearing chains dragging metal moans. Others said that they could smell jet fuel and feel a cold breeze on their necks. Many claimed that the ghost of the flight engineer was trying to warn them about something. To their surprise, the airline agreed, and ground crews searched the wreck for any possible dangers. After finding nothing, the airline's vice president told the pilots that it was all in their heads. That's when things got really creepy. As the pilots were taking off, they reported seeing the ghost of the captain, standing next to the control tower, waving his arms as if he wanted to stop them. Now, mind you, this isn't the kind of thing you can just shrug off. Terrified, the pilots aborted their takeoff and returned to the terminal. They grounded the plane and sent it back to the workshop for another round of inspections. But the creepiness continued. One mechanic was working on the plane's hydraulics when he heard the sound of footsteps coming from inside the empty cockpit. He wasn't alone either. Another mechanic heard it too. But before they could investigate further, the sound stopped abruptly. It was at this point that everyone realized they were dealing with more than just a simple case of nerves. A rumor spread throughout the company that the ghosts were haunting the airplane. Employees tried everything to get rid of them. An exterminator was called in to bless the plane with holy water, and priests came to perform an exorcism. None of it worked. The ghost of Eastern Airlines Flight 401 continued to haunt the crew and passengers alike. Some people believed that the ghost was the work of a disgruntled employee who wanted revenge on the company. After all, the airline had used the remains of the deceased as spare parts. This led to chaos in the cockpit as each crew member blamed the other for bringing the ghost upon them. Morale became so low that pilots refused to fly the cursed plane. In fact, some pilots were too afraid to even enter the aircraft. They were worried that the ghost of the captain might drag them down to their deaths, like he did the original crew. With fear running rampant among the staff, the airline had no choice but to ground the entire fleet. This meant that hundreds of thousands of passengers would now have to be accommodated on other flights. It was during this time that the airline conducted an internal investigation. They interviewed crew members and maintenance workers to find out the truth behind the haunting. They discovered that the ghost was appearing more frequently and interacting with people. For example, one flight attendant was stacking dishes when she felt a cold spot appear behind her. When she turned around, she saw the ghost of a man standing in front of her. She screamed and ran out of the plane. When the ghost appeared, the airline knew they had to do something fast. They brought in paranormal investigators, who used electromagnetic field meters to detect any unusual energy signatures. What they found was shocking. The electromagnetic readings in the cockpit were off the charts, meaning that there was some kind of powerful energy source at work. But what after the investigation was complete, the airline made the decision to retire the remaining planes. They couldn't risk anyone else being hurt because of a haunted airplane. In total, 3 Eastern Airlines Boeing 737s were retired due to paranormal activity. This led to speculation that there were more planes out there with parts from the crashed 401, but that has never been confirmed. However, the ghost story doesn't end there. Some people believe that the ghost of the plane's captain is still out there searching for his crew. According to legend, he wants to reunite with them for one last flight. Today, the tale of Eastern Airlines Flight 401 is considered one of the most famous ghost stories ever told. There are countless books and articles written about it, not to mention TV shows and documentaries. Some people claim that these stories are exaggerated for dramatic effect, but others insist that they are true. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But while you're at it, be sure to like and subscribe so that we can keep making awesome videos like this one. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.